No new Blue Eyes support cards! It feels good to say it finally. I really wanted to open the video with that at least once, so... But hey, there we go. Volume 6 is here, and we have 61 card this time, because like hell I'm leaving one single card already in the Volume 7 folder. So we're going to be taking a look at 61 new cards that have been added for various different archetypes I've covered in the past on Archetype analysis. We have lots of the good, lots of the mediocre, and lots of the questionably unnecessary. Yeah, let's just start. We start with the single solitary Infernity support card, that being Void Cauldron, and it's really unnecessary. The Infernities really love their graveyard setup, and some of them do benefit from like getting banished because they don't have anything better to do in the graveyard. But the fact that this thing is a trap card, and the fact that this thing has a destruction effect if you have any cards in your hand, it basically means that the Infernities will basically have this thing lying around for one turn only, and that's it. And even though the protection effect is so not worth it, because most of their other monsters can accomplish this thing's effect much better without much effort, so yeah, just forget about this thing. Next up, we move on to Chronomalies, which got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 cards new cards worth of support. First of which we have Chronomaly Megala Globe, which is essentially a Lone Fire Blossom of the archetype, which also happens to be recyclable, which is always a nice thing to consider. So yeah, I would definitely run 3 of these at all time. Same goes for Chronomaly Akambaro figure, which sorry. It would be easier if it was a Figma figure, then yeah, you know. Anyway, it's protection, which happens to basically recycle itself and build up field presence, and also it's a level 5 monster for all those lovely rank 5 Xyz monsters you can make, one of which is the newly added Chronomaly Vimana, and this is just not worth it. You're better off running number 101 Silent Honor Arc instead of this if you really crave an effect like this. Sure, you can summon it a bit easier with the archetype's lovely nature of swarming with level 5 monsters, but come on. Silent Honor Arc is a much better card, and it's way easier to make, but yeah, you could make the argument that Chronomalies don't really like rank 4 spammings, but again, it's a better card. Next up, we have Chronomaly Palace Trilithon, and this is basically an archetypal double summon, which is always appreciated in my book, so definitely run 3 of these at all time. And Chronomaly Esperanza Glyph is a cute shortcut to higher level, higher rank, I should say, Xyz monsters, which you can basically summon anything from rank 4 and above, since they have, I think they actually have rank 4 Xyz monster. I think Chateau Hayek is a rank 4 monster. I think it is. I'm not too sure because it's been a long time since I reviewed this archetype. But yeah, they Chronomaly Crystal Chrononaut is their lowest ranked monster, which is rank 3, and their highest one is of course number 6, Chaos Atlantis, if we of course ignore the Chaos upgrade, which is rank 7, but you're most likely summoning that with a rank up magic if you're running one. And not to mention, Argent Chaos Force is back at being unlimited, so be sure to definitely main deck it, because Chronomalies really love that rank up magic if they can actually get access to it. So yeah. Next up, the archetype that got some new support is the Rose Dragon archetype. First of which we have the level 1 Witch of the Blood Rose, which also adds one other card that was previously not a part of the archetype into it. due to how its effect is really portrayed. It's basically a level 1 tuner, which is of course really good since you can summon it with 1 for 1, and basically it's a 2 card Black Rose Dragon, because that's just how it works. And with the monster, which we'll get into in a minute. But first we have to talk about Rux Rose Dragon, which is a really nice dragon tuner, which it also searches stuff out and has some greater effects, which can basically recycle your stash. So yeah, it's a good card to consider, especially due to the fact how their new boss monster functions. And the card that the Blood Rose adds to the archetype is Witch of the Black Rose, which is a level 4 spellcaster, which cannot be special summoned and basically functions perfectly in Monster Mash decks, since the nature of its effect is really dependent on Monster Mash decks. And basically, if you pair it up with Rose Fairy, which is not even a part of the Black Rose Dragon archetype, it's basically that 2 card Black Rose Dragon, like I said, with Witch of the Blood Rose, because you need 1 for 1 and one other monster in your hand in order to pull this combo off. So yeah, this is a really neat way of tying cards that Aki used in the anime to the actual archetype. And one of the monsters you can actually summon with this, if you choose to not to add the Rose Fairy to the top deck using Blood Rose's effect, that being Garden Rose Flora, which is a level 5 plant synchro with the exact same stats as Garden Rose Maiden, but this time around it's a tuner, and it is essentially meant to synergize with Black Garden, and it's an archetypal formula synchron in a way how this thing functions. And it basically does what Formula Synchron does when Black Rose Dragon players run it. Run it so they can tune it with other stuff during their opponent's turn, to basically turn Black Rose Dragon into a quick play field wipe for everyone, and mostly for the opponent, because they happen to splash other protection effects for their monsters and cards altogether. And Garden Rose Flora is an archetypal version of that, so it's really nice of Konami to look out for people like that. And speaking of Garden Rose Maiden, which I mentioned just earlier, you can also tune this thing with her and get their new boss monster, Blood Rose Dragon, and it looks amazing. Sorry, the artwork this thing originates from it. I download all of these new cards from Alan Mac 95, as you can see from his DeviantArt page. Huge credit to him. He uploads all of these, and I guess he took this picture when the card was still in a very tiny magazine frame or something when it was first revealed. The picture looks much better now, especially if you go on to the Yu-Gi-Oh! Pro's artwork of the card, or even the wiki's art looks better. But yeah, this is just a consequence of cards being released really early as very tiny resolutions. But anyway, this is about the card and not about its artwork mostly. It's a level 10 with 3200 attack and 2400 defense. It took a really long time, but Black Rose Dragon finally got a evolution, and it's a completely generic level 10, which basically is just missing the effect to send every card in the opponent's hand to the graveyard to be an absolute beast of a monster, because if it had that effect, it would be like banned immediately due to how good this thing is. Mind you, this also banishes your graveyard, so you have to be careful. But again, like I said, the new support, that being the Rux Rose Dragon and the Blood Rose, which all have graveyard effects, so you can banish them in order to use it. So you can make yourself a decent challenge to basically throw in a bunch of cards that have graveyard effects, so you can either get those cards back into your hand or banish them in order to get some benefits in terms of like protection effects or some additional swarming. So yeah, Blood Rose is actually a very good monster, really worth building a deck around and giving yourself a fun challenge if you want to give some love to your planned synchro decks. Although I kind of somewhat am surprised they didn't make it a level 9 so they could basically allow you to use Formula Synchron with Black Rose Dragon in order to go into this thing and again make this thing a quick play. But there are other also. There's also the Garden Rose Flora and Maiden, so there is ways to do it. So yeah, it's a really good card. Not to mention Garden Rose Flora can also summon Black Rose Dragon herself by using a quick effect. So yeah, this is becoming a very fun and competitive archetype. And Petal Rose Shot, which is their final card, is a quick play, double revival and recycling, which is just too good to pass up. So I would definitely advise that you run 3 of these. Okay, now for the weird territory once more, or in this case the below average territory. Egyptian gods got some support yet again, and this one is by far the most bizarre support wave because one of their new support cards basically pulled the Wicked Gods into the archetype, and if you don't know what the Wicked Gods are, that's fine, nobody does, they're irrelevant. Anyway, the Wicked Gods are a manga-only archetype which were used by Pegasus' son in the manga, and I believe one duel where he would duel Yugi for revenge for murdering Pegasus, but this isn't Yugi's fault in the manga, as Bakura was the one who did it in order to get his Millennium Eye. But anyway, yeah, he used the Wicked Gods, which he created himself, in just for the sole purpose of destroying Yugi. The Wicked Eraser, which is supposed to be the equivalent to Slifer the Sky Dragon, is a very mediocre field control destruction card, and yeah, it's very flimsy, and just like the regular Egyptian gods, these things require 3 tributes, which is just amazing in today's format where tribute summoning is only reserved for archetypes centered around it. So yeah, in other words, the Wicked Eraser is not worth your time, nor is the Wicked Dreadroot, which has a simpler effect, but I think is even worse than the Wicked Eraser, as all he does is halve the attack and defense of all monsters on the field except this card. Mind you, you can actually pull off some neat OTK strategies with this thing, but again, this thing is a monster which cannot be... by the way, all of the Wicked Gods cannot be special summoned, which is another reason why these things are so horrendously more atrocious than the original Egyptian gods. And all you get is a slightly better Black Garden effect, which is not worth it. You're better off just running the regular Black Garden, since you can actually build a really potent control deck based around it. But the most interesting of the bunch is the Wicked Avatar, as he actually has the effect that your opponent cannot activate spell or traps until the end of the second turn after this card was normal summoned, and this card's attack is always equals the strongest attack point value on your opponent's field plus 100. So essentially, this thing will always be a Moon Mirror Shield on legs. And for a limited time, you can completely shut down 2/3 of all cards in the game, which is actually a pretty nasty lockdown effect. Of course, you have to pull it off first, because this thing can actually be really badly interrupted by something like Bottomless or Solemn Warning or anything that can basically send this black ball wherever it came from, since the Wicked Gods do not have the Egyptian god ability that the cards and effects cannot be activated upon their summon, therefore making them inferior. And the reason for this inclusion is this card, Divine Evolution, which grants the Egyptian god cards effects, which could make them be considered as as very potent boss monsters, as opposed to very inconsequential and borderline bad tribute 3 monsters to summon something in order. Basically, what I'm trying to say, it basically makes them more. It basically makes them worth it, worth the tribute summoning 3 monsters in order to get them onto the field. And this thing also affects the wicked gods for some reason. I have no idea why this thing was made to affect the wicked gods, but it at least makes them somewhat playable, even though I would tell you to run the original Egyptian gods on any day of the week as opposed to the wicked gods. But anyway, our final card for the Egyptian god lineup is the Absolute Divine Beast, which has one of the effects is basically Call of the Haunted, really bad Call of the Haunted, which is fine, I guess. And the other effect is such an incredibly specific win more effect that it's basically just not worth it. If it was like a quick effect, which you can apply during any time during the opponent's turn, then I might have actually called it a really fun card to pull off. But as it is right now, it'll destroy stuff that you don't want to destroy sometimes, which will lead to some nasty floating effects. So yeah, it could have been a really fun disruption card, but as it is right now, it's really underwhelming. Don't waste your time with this one. Alright, we have one single solitary Gaia support card, that being Curse of Dragon, the Magical Night Dragon, which is a level 5 fusion extender for the archetype, which requires a warrior monster and a level 5 or higher dragon monster. But the fact that this thing is a level 5 monster means you can use instant fusion in Dark Gaia builds to summon this thing, and to basically go into their higher monsters with some much more needed extension power that this thing offers. And yeah, I call this really good because of the fact that it's a level 5 monster. Even if it was a level 6 monster, I would still let it a pass because they're printing a new card which is called Retort Fusion, which is just like instant fusion, but it affects level 6 or below monsters. So you basically get one more level at the cost of Retort Fusion being a hard once per turn, which I think instant fusion is not a hard once per turn. I need to check that. I think that, like I said, instant fusion you can activate as many times as you want if you have 1000 life points to spare, while Retort Fusion has the exact same effect and activation condition, but only for one level higher. But it's also a hard once per turn. Let's see, instant fusion. I'm googling right now. Let's see. Oh yeah, instant fusion is also a hard once per turn. Sorry, false alarm. But yeah, basically Retort Fusion I think is going to replace instant fusion then when it comes to viability, since it again affects one more level of monsters. But anyway, that was it for the Gaia support. Yeah, and next up we have one single solitary Sphinx support card, that being Pharaonic Guardian Sphinx, which is a level 8 monster. That's basically our upgraded version of Guardian Sphinx, as the effect you get when it's flipped face up is really devastating, as it shuffles all monsters your opponent controls into the deck without targeting. And not to mention that it has the exact other effects as Guardian Sphinx, as the OG Guardian Sphinx, meaning you can turn it face down again. And not to mention it also floats into a level 5 rock monster from your hand or deck in face down defense position, which you can also use the original Guardian Sphinx. So yeah, so these stun face down decks, which are never going to be really competitively viable unless they get some really broken stuff and really broken support cards to help them out in that matter. They're never going to be meta viable, but this thing certainly helps. So you gotta make the most out of it, since it's also a level 8 monster, meaning it's a trade-in target. So yeah, this is a great card. Next up we have a single solitary support card for the Firewall archetype, that being Proxy Horse, and I'd like to take this moment to address that Firewall Dragon is no longer banned. They put him back onto 3 after him receiving an errata, which basically makes his effect a lot more limited than it used to be. They gave him a hard once per turn for starters, and they also made that you can only summon Cyberse monsters with his effect, which is a bit overkill. If they kept on the hard once per turn only, that would fix it and nothing else would be done. So yeah, anyway, Proxy Horse, yeah, it's a really much needed card for Cyberse extenders, and it's really good. Yeah, so Firewall fans I presume have already bought it, and they're really celebrating that Firewall Dragon is finally back and that all the ace monsters are finally playable once more. Now, if they only could unban the summon sorcerers, then my life would truly be complete. Next up, the Ignisters got some new support. At Ignisters, I should probably say. We are with their only main deck monster being Danmari at Ignister. I wonder what Danmachi at Ignister would be like. Anyway, it's a perfectly fine effect, which I mean it's a bit slower since you need to wait for attacks to be involved in order to in order to summon this thing. But the second effect is so specific and hard to pull off. I mean, it's not that hard, but I mean, it's hard to pull off in a sense that it requires a Link 6 monster in order to be on the field. And the only one at the time of this video going up is their archetypal synchro monster, of course, the Arrival at Ignister. I mean, they can summon him with relative ease by utilizing the Dark Templar's effect, but again, a simple spot negation for this kind of condition is unwarranted, basically. And as for their final monster period, we have the Link 1 Dark Infant at Ignister. I was fully expecting them to print Dark Vite at Ignister, but here we are, I guess. It's a fantastic Link 1, which basically can accelerate the speed and the summon process of the Arrival at Ignister, like I already mentioned. It also searches your field spells, so that basically makes an archetypal Salaman-grade Bale Links. So, yeah, this is a good card to consider having, although the arrow is a bit annoying. But hey, if you're doing some fun stuff with the what's it called, Trigate Wizard, then yeah, this is a very welcomely added Link 1 monster. Next up we have their 2 spell cards and their 1 trap. First of which we have When I First Met You, which is a very cool searching option for the deck, and you'd basically run 3 at all times, as it's basically searching most archetypes would dream for, and it's not even that specific as the long effect text might make it seem. So You and I is a continuous spell which has different buffs which offers different buffs or debuffs to your and opponent's monster, depend on the monsters you're summoning. The Earth and Water one is the easiest one to apply, although the effect is not so impactful to compensate. Although the Wind and Light and Fire and Dark are actually very versatile, especially the latter, which free tokens in a Link spam archetype are always appreciated. So yeah, You and I is a definite 3-off staple. And our final card is Mono I Mono, which I just love for the artwork alone, and I really love that duel. Anyway, monsters your opponent controls losing 100 attack is not too relevant in my opinion, but the real kicker is the second effect, being basically giving you an Armades shutdown until the end of the damage step, and you can also use the third effect to basically recover your lost resources if the opponent manages to get the better of you. So yeah, not a staple or anything, but it can provide some fun results depending on your deck building preference, if you're going for a more trap-centric build or not. Okay, so that was it for the Agnister lineup, and next we have a single solitary Scrap support card with Scrap Raptor, which is essentially an archetypal heraldic beast Leo, and it also searches out some back row pieces, like, I mean, one single solitary back row piece. I think Scrap Factory is their field spell, if my memory serves me right. So yeah, it's also a tuner monster and a dinosaur monster, which is actually very important, since you can maybe splash in some text in form of Ultimate Conductor Tyranno. So yeah, it's definitely an interesting card and should be experimented with to get the most optimal results you desire. Okay, well, Blue Eyes, thank God, finally didn't get any new support in this wave. A certain other White Dragon did. I'm talking, of course, about Stardust Dragon, my favorite synchro monster and monster of all time. And yeah, that support wave is pretty lovely in all the right ways, and it really shows how much they actually cared for 5Ds, and how much they really like this concept of Stardust Dragon. And of course, this support wave is also a giant homage to Quasar Dragons. So yeah, all the Quasar Dragons, I should say. All right, first of which we start off with the much long overdue retrain of Majestic Dragon, that being Wish Converging Dragon, and first of which it has a really baffling limitation of you being able to special summon it by any means only once per turn, which is not great, to be honest. But it also cannot be used as synchro material except for the synchro summon of a Majestic monster, which is the exact same caveat as the original, but we also got a new Majestic extra deck monster, so all is forgiven. Anyway, it also has a name changing effect to Majestic Dragon, because yes, the new Majestic monster also requires Majestic Dragon specifically to be used as material, and it also provides some level 1 field presence if you summon him while you control a level 8 synchro monster or higher. Yeah, that is actually really important. So yeah, this is your go-to tuner monster, and 1/1 is a thing. So yeah, and also it's in all inherent special summoning condition is nifty, and our new archetype actually does offer several ways for you to put this guy on top of your deck. So yeah. Alright, let's go on to their other tuner they got, with that being Stardust Synchron, and I'm really happy this thing exists, because who else wouldn't want a Synchron themed tuner after built after their favorite Synchro monster. Anyway, basically this thing is such a great card, since it also has Synchron in the name, meaning you can search it out not only with their new archetypal support, but also the tuning spell card, which searches any Synchron tuner monster, and the tuning's effect of sending the top card to the graveyard actually works well in tandem with this thing's effect and the effect of some of their other monsters, including Stardust Xiaolong, which is actually much better this time around due to this support waves in a new style of play. Anyway, this thing has a really nifty summoning condition, which works well with one of their new support cards, which we'll get to in a minute, and of course Performance Trick Clown, which is actually a very welcome addition here due to how this thing basically equals an instant Stardust Dragon. And yeah, it's a shame that he gets banished the moment he uses this effect. I would have appreciated if it didn't, but hey, here we are. Combined with Stardust Trail, which we finally got the personification of the woman who was in the artwork on of the what's it called, Converging Wishes, and yeah, I really like this design. I really want a whole archetype of these. I really want the Stardust archetype to really grow beyond this single card and grow it more into various dragon ladies such as these to basically give the to turn Stardust Dragons into a single-handed solitary negate absolutely everything control build. I think it could really be fun. But anyway, this combined with Stardust Synchron, or you can swap out with Performance Trickle, basically equals an instant Stardust Dragon, and not to mention it summons a token, which is actually a very appreciated effect due to the fact how their new boss monster functions. And speaking of that boss monster is Shooting Majestic Star Dragon. It's a level 11 with 4000 attack and 3300 defense, requires Majestic Dragon and one or more non-tuner monsters, which includes a Dragon Synchro monster. And it's basically a Quasar for all those, well, it should be more appropriate to call it a Blazar. A Blazar for all those decks who don't have all the necessary resources to spend to make the actual Quasar Blazar or Cipher Divine Dragon. So yeah, this is actually a really nifty alternative, although it is a bit glaring that this is a level 11 monster for whatever reason. I fully expected this thing to be a retrain of the original Majestic Star Dragon to basically eliminate the need for him. And thank God this thing does not have the extra deck shuffle effect that the original Majestic Star and Majestic Red Dragon had. Although the archetype does have a card that mitigates that effect and basically makes it that so that it doesn't even exist. So yeah, this thing is amazing in all the right ways, so you should definitely run a couple of copies of him if you can make it in your deck. So yeah, great card. And moving on to their back row, first of which we have the continuous spell Arriving Miracle. It's a continuous spell which basically, this is the card that I mentioned that mitigates the effect of Majestic Star and Majestic Red Dragons. Okay, it actually works on only on Majestic Star Dragon. Majestic Red Dragon is screwed when it comes to it. But yeah, it basically eliminates the effect which returns him to the extra deck during the end phase and then resummons the OG Stardust Dragon. And not to mention the other two effects it grants when you synchro summon a synchro monster. Basically plays in tandem with the Wish Converging Dragon, and not to mention it also special summons other tuners from the hand, meaning you can basically use the two tuners for, I don't know, you can also use Tyrant Red Dragon Archfiend for all I care with those two tuners. Or you can also maybe try to pull off a summon of Red Supernova Dragon Knight. The possibilities are truly endless with this one, and it's also easily searchable by the archetype. And the way you'll be searching it sometimes, or the monsters of this archetype, is Stardust Illuminate, which is basically an archetypal searcher which can also occasionally set up your graveyard, and it basically encourages it to run Stardust Xi-Long, since you can actually get a lot of merit out of his graveyard resummon effect. Not to mention he's a level 1 monster, so you can summon him with 1/1, and you can basically tribute him to trigger the effect of Stardust Synchron. So yeah, all bases are basically covered with this thing. So yeah, not to mention the level increase effect can also come in handy pretty often. So yeah, this is a great card to consider, and you should always run 3 of these. And our final spell card is the Majestic Absorption, which is, yeah, a lot of battle-oriented effects. The first effect is a bit funny, since after you equip the monster to the synchro monster, it basically does nothing. It doesn't even gain the attack value. So I was just depending given by the card's artwork and what it references, I was fully expecting majestic shooting majestic star dragon to be like reverse mech lord in order to like absorb everything, including mech lords. So yeah. Anyway, yeah. This is a neat card to consider, although it's not too necessary in the deck. Although the direct attacking effect can actually edge you closer to victory, so I would consider running one in for those specific situations where you can finish off a limping opponent with a single 4,000 uh, attack points into the face. And finally, we have the continuous trap Majestic Mirage, which is fine, nothing too amazing, but it can help you extend your plays more often than not. But again, it's a type of card you you run by preference, and yeah, it can help out. But the fact that it's a trap card makes it a bit too slow for my taste. So yeah. Alright, so that was it for the Stardust Dragon series, and next up we have a single solitary support card for the Charmer archetype, and that being the Link to Lena the Light Charmer Shining. And it's the exact same thing as all the four previous Charmers, except it's for light monsters, and that's about it. Yeah, I mean, it can turn Performance Trick Clown and something else into an instant Link 3 or Link 4 monster, which is always really neat. But again, everything I said to the other four Charmers before applies here, and you shouldn't be too surprised if we see a dark themed Charmer in this form in the volumes to follow. The single piece of support that the Pot archetype has gotten is Pot of Disparity. It's the exact same activation cost and condition as Pot of Extravagance, and it's not good. In fact, I would advise running Pot of Extravagance any day of the week instead of this thing, because this is just bafflingly bad. That it's just that unnecessary and terrible compared to even Pot of Desires. How do you make a card that's worse than Pot of Desires? Like, how? Well, anyway, don't run this. Two new cards worth of Trap Trick support are the following: the effect monster Trap Trick Ginaloa, which is standard Trap Tricks monster, which has a neat summoning condition from the hand, and not to mention it also recycles your whole trap cards from the graveyard, and yeah, it's a neat card to consider, but not as much as their Link monster, Traptrix Utricularia, which is a Link 2 which requires 2 insect and or plant monsters. And this thing basically is another fantastic Link monster, just like Sarah, which does just about everything for the archetype. And not to mention that she has a really big value of attack points for a Link 2 monster at 1800. So yeah, not to mention the arrows are really good. Basically, if you want your trap checks to be Link spammy with, I don't know, something like Trigate Wizard, again, this is a nice monster to consider for your extra deck toolbox. Okay, another card that got 2 cards worth of support are Gustos. Gusto Wither is another Gusto tuner, which as far as tuners go in this archetype is pretty serviceable and fine for the archetype. It is a bit self-destructive in terms of how you can actually special summon it, but the other effect is basically Foolish Burial on Legs, which is something that archetypes really appreciate. So yeah, you can go wrong with 2 or 3 of these. However, their equip spell, Gusto Tailwind, is freaking fantastic. It does absolutely everything. It basically equals an instant synchro monster depending on with what you pair it up. And not to mention the fact that this thing is an equip card is really important as well, because Gustos love spamming synchro monsters, and one of the monsters they can run now is Power Tool Dragon, so they can use its effect to search this thing out to go into even more synchros. And but it is a bit limiting that you can only equip it to a Gusto monster. I would have loved it a bit more if it said like a psychic monster or a wind monster, because Gustos are, I think, wind psychics. I'm not entirely sure. I think they have winged beasts, psychics, and spellcasters in their uh, arsenal. So equipping only to a wind monster would have made the card a lot more splashable and consistent. But as it is right now, it's far from a bad idea. So you definitely run 3 of these at all time. And for this flow, I should say, the last card, the last set of cards that got 2 cards worth of supports are Laval's. The first of being their synchro monster, Lavalval X-Lord. It's a level 8 fire synchro, which actually has a really nice effect, as it basically shuts down monster effects. I mean, it's a very hard shutdown for a single monster effect, since the effect is hard once per turn, but it doesn't really matter all too much, because the effect does not target, and it basically destroys it from anywhere, including the hand. So yeah, so this is basically a very great boss monster. Not to mention, it also floats into up to 3 non-synchro fire monsters, meaning you can use them for link plays or synchro plays if this card happens to leave the field. It has 200 defense, which is kind of expected now of fire monsters. Although I wish he had like 100 or 200 more attack, then that would have made him a lot more grand and more imposing. And also the spell card is Explosive Birth of the Flame Champion is also really neat, as it allows you to use resources from the graveyard to summon stuff from the extra deck by the way of synchro summoning. Although the card does not actually state that the summon is treated as a synchro summon, which can actually lead to monsters not being able to be revived if they hit the graveyard, so you have to watch out for that. But still, this is a good card which can really use the graveyard setup that Lavals really love setting up. So yeah, this is a fantastic card to consider, and not to mention that you can actually special summon any fire synchro monster, so there's some splashability here as well. So yeah, it's a nice card to consider. And now it's time for a spectacle. The next archetype that received multiple cards worth of support, 3 cards to be exact, is the Numeron archetype. Now, Chaos number 1000 Numeronius. It has the exact same effects as its anime version, and it's okay, nothing too amazing or anything, but I know what you came here to see. You came to see this lad, this absolute unit. Chaos Imaginary number 1000 Numeronius Numeronia. The first ever rank 13 in the game. Requires 5 level 13 monsters, and it has the exact same effects as in the anime. Yes, this does include 100,000 attack, although there's a slight change, as in order for him to gain 100,000 attack, you actually need to use Numeronius' effect in order to summon him. So that difference aside, it's the exact same monster from the anime, and it's not worth it, because this thing does have that imposing 100,000 attack, which was one of the biggest attack point values in all of Yu-Gi-Oh! but it doesn't have a single solitary ounce of protection. How could you screw up there? So yeah, you can go for it. You can make your deck build your deck around this thing, but it's really not worth it. Really not. You can use the new support card Numeron Chaos Ritual in order to easily summon Numeronius without resorting to controlling 5 level 12 monsters, which is a borderline impossible task in this day and age. But yeah, it's not worth it, not recommended. I mean, the deck does need some way to shine now that Utopic Zexal got banned and they don't have a playmaker. But hey, at least they have something now, as awkward as it may seem. But anyway, this is it for Numerons. I don't think they'll be getting any new support now, unless they really want to make something out of Numeronia. But anyway, let's continue on to two archetypes that only got one card worth of support. First of which we have the Merlantians, which got the level 7 Dark Monster Chaos Daedalus, which is a Merlantian slash Umi card only by name because it supports everything but the Merlantian underwater playstyle, because this is a standard Chaos monster with standard Chaos effects, and it's fine, but again, the fact that it requires a field spell in order to use the effect basically ties it to the archetype. So yeah, it's an archetypal card only by name. Now our next archetype that received one card worth of support are Fossils with Flint Cragger, and if you guessed right, it only had the 500 burn damage effect when it was present in its anime form, and all these effects were tacked on because they really needed it to be. Which is all fine and dandy if it wasn't for the fact that Fossil's main gimmick is so not worth the effort, and so flimsy and not consistent and self-destructive. Like, why would you make an archetype with such a gimmick when we already have the invoked archetype in the game? Why? How did this archetype win that God's Forsaken poll, which the Sun Avalanche should have won? Or hell, even if you have included the Armatos Legio monsters, they would have won the contest by a landslide. Why this godforsaken GX era Gutter Trash Season 3 archetype? Okay, I've said what I needed to say. I really feel the need to move on because I really cannot look at this archetype any longer. Oh boy, another GX era archetype that got new support, those being Cyberdarks. And Cyberdarks and Cyber Dragons are officially now one archetype. Okay, it isn't obvious with their first monster with a Cyberdark Chimera, but it is the first monster that ever to search out Power Bond, which is essentially near limitless way to summon their fusion monsters, which hit really hard, and it's basically an essential component for all fusion machine decks which focus on massive attack power. So yeah, Chimera is a 3-off staple just for the fact that it can search out Power Bond. Yeah, I'm not kidding you for that. And their final monster is the level 12, I think it's level 12, Cyber Dark End Dragon. And it ties the archetypes together because this thing requires Cyber Dark Dragon and Cyber End Dragon as material. And the problem I have with him is that it requires the original Cyber Dark Dragon, which nobody freaking uses anymore because it's not worth running. However, this thing does have an alternate summoning condition where you can tribute a Cyber Darkness Dragon, or a Cyber Dark Fusion monster in case of future proofing, wink wink, equipped with Cyber Dragon in order to summon this thing. And yeah, it's about as it's unaffected by your opponent's activated effects, which is actually a really powerful protection effect, which on top of a 5,000 attack monster. So yeah, this is by far the best Cyber Dark monster the archetype has ever gotten. So yeah, it's a problem that it requires specifically Cyber End Dragon as one of the monsters required in order to go into this majestic beast. The problem here, of course, is that Cyber Dragon is barely worth running in this day and age, so yeah, you might run into that kind of problem, but hey, if it's just to bring this thing out, which is already a very powerful monster in of its own, I guess it doesn't hurt that bad. Extra Foolish Burial is a thing after all. I already mentioned Power Bond, and next up we have their final spell card, which is Cybernetic Horizon, and this card is always treated as a Cyberdark card in case you want to search it with their back row searchers, and it's pretty good. It's basically a basically a very nice setup tool along with granting you search power. So yeah, it's a searcher which also sets up your graveyard. So definitely run 2 or 3 of these. The Token Festival is one of the other archetypes that got support, but thankfully it's only one card, and it's Fukubeki. This card is one of the most pointless cards I've ever seen in my life, so let's just move on. Next up we have Sun Avalon Daphne, which is our first monster that the Sun Avalon archetype have received as new support. And for extra linking purposes, it has fantastic arrows, and it also recycles extra deck monsters, which is plant link monsters, which is actually really good for extra link decks, because you can actually utilize those monsters again if you need certain summon requirements to be fulfilled once more. So yeah, this is a definite staple in the deck, but the real star of this show is Sun Avalon Melius. This thing is amazing. This thing is basically turns Sunvine Thrasher into one of the most versatile attackers into the game, and not to mention when it comes to extra linking, it also revives Sunseed Genius Lokis, which are again essential for the deck, and not to mention you can use their effects, use those monster bodies to go into more link monsters for extra link variants. So yeah, Sun Avalon is shaping up to be one beautiful flower of an archetype. And their final card is Sunvine Crossbreed, which again it is a nice little variety in field presence, but the fact that you need to tribute a link monster in order to get this effect off is a bit eh. But again, Daphne's a thing, so it's rarely dead in your hand or dead altogether. And again, one other monster of the Holy Knights that got added to the game is Holy Knight CL, which is just there. It's nothing too amazing, and it's nothing too bad either. It's another good level 4 light monster for the archetype, which supports the level 7 light dragon monster gimmick they attach to themselves. So yeah, this is a good card, and worth a spot or two. And next up we have Aliens. They got 2 new pieces of support. First of which we have the main deck monster Alien Buster, which is just amazing. It basically you can basically set up the graveyard with recombination device, Foolish Burial. Ammonite can put him to good use due to him being a level 4 monster, not to mention he sprays A counters himself if he is sent to the graveyard, and with recombination device he can spread even more counters. So yeah, this is a very versatile monster, and you definitely want to max out on this guy as soon as he hits the TCG. The same goes for their new Link monster, Cosmic Pincer Zealure. It requires 2 or more reptile type monsters. Summoning condition I freaking love. I really wish the potential new Fortune ladies had this kind of genericness in mind when they designed their eventual new support. And not to mention, he also provides some nice play extension and searching options, along with utilizing A counters as a way of generating resources for you, as opposed to also weakening the opponent's stuff. So yeah, it basically has some. It basically uses the A counters in the same vein as or Alien Overlord uses them. So yeah, that's an interesting way to use them indeed. And yeah, being not a Link 3 with nice attack values, it's definitely a staple in the deck. And next up we have a single new support card of the Magistus archetype, that being Reliona, the Magistus Glass Witch, which is a rank 4 spellcaster exceeds monsters, which requires two level 4 spellcaster monsters with different attributes. And it's an easy to make rank 4 exceeds monster, which basically special summons stuff from the deck, which is again very valuable in basically any archetype. It's basically the level of consistency the archetype would kill for to have. So yeah, this is definitely worth 2 or 3 spots in the extra deck. And finally we move on to the final archetype of today's volume, those being armed dragons. First of which we have Armored Dragon, which is always treated as an armed dragon card. That's a bit of a weird naming convention here, but anyway, it's a bit slow, but the range of monsters it actually searches out, and by that I mean special summons, is absolutely insane. And on top of that he has 1900 attack, which is already a very respectable value of attack points for a level 4 monster. So yeah, I would definitely max out on this guy, since it's all basically the closest thing the archetype has to a normal summonable beat stick at this point. And one of the monsters this thing can search out and summon to the field is Pile Armed Dragon, which is another very good boss monster for the archetype, as it also sets up the graveyard with other Armed Dragon monsters upon using its effects. Not to mention it's a level 7 monster, so rank 7 plays are always encouraged. Also 7-star swords if you decide to run them for draw power, and yeah, it's a great card. And finally, we are done with yet another volume. This was a trip and a half, and sadly, while we don't have any new Fortune Lady support cards, might actually do a full-on dedicated video for Fortune Ladies when they actually do get some new support, because the way they are now, they really are just one really good new support way from being a very consistent swarm deck and very consistent extra deck vomit machine deck, because what they're lacking right now is, I would appreciate more monsters with more inherent special summoning conditions, possibly more tuners, because a single level 1 tuner is not going to do all that much, especially if you can't use its effect more times than once per turn, and that I mean a hard once per turn. And again, extra deck monsters. One single solitary level 7 synchro monster is certainly not enough. They need something else, damn it, and here's hoping it happens. But anyway, until then, into volume 7, when we see each other again in this series. Thank you all so much for watching. Stay tuned for more videos and updates. Comment, like, and subscribe. The character duels are on their way. I'm just waiting again for the copyright dispute to settle. It's only got a bit over 10 days, I believe. So yeah, stay tuned for that. The next character duel is probably going to be the next video is probably going to be a character duel, and it's going to be here's a little sneak peek: Yuri versus Merrick, which is another request I've gotten way back when. Not that long ago, but long enough to be called way back when. Anyway, see you all and have a good day. Peace.